Over to you.
Thank you so much for very kindly introducing us and for so brilliantly introducing the session as well. Good morning to everybody and welcome to this face-to-face session. It's something of a traditional pause from the main program here at the World Islamic Economic Forum, where, as we heard, we can have the opportunity to meet a major personality and explore the childhood stories and the family, the education and the career, and in so doing understand some of the influences that have shaped their person. We are delighted to have a wonderful guest with us today, Dr. Surin Pitsuwan from Thailand, who many of you will know, of course, as the former Secretary General of ASEAN and also as the former Foreign Minister of Thailand. But Dr. Surin, when I was thinking about today's face-to-face and thinking about what we could speak about, so many more words came to mind, much more than just Minister and Secretary General. I thought about educator, father, son, brother, husband, architect, visionary, politician, and of course, many, many more things. But let's start off with your life first, because you had the most fascinating life, which from its first days began in a pondok in southern Thailand, an Islamic boarding school. You were not just born in an Islamic boarding school, you were born to a family of teachers. Tell us about that.
Thank you very much, James. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I only accept this challenge because Tun Musa and Dan Sri Fauzi called me up and said, people want to know more about how a Pondok student, a Budak Pondok, could become Foreign Minister of Thailand and Secretary General of ASEAN. I'm humbled to be here, but I'm also quite tempted to accept this occasion, this challenge, because serving as Secretary General of ASEAN, you were never a first. I had to work for 10 bosses, including Pak Lah, who just left the room when he was Prime Minister. So for once, replacing former President Bambang Yudhoyono, I can act presidential, I hope. But yes, I was born to a guru family. My great-grandfather found the Pondok during the Second World War. The reason it was founded in southern Thailand was because of the war. My grandfather was studying in Makkah, 9 years, the war, and there was no Hujjaj, no pilgrims going to Makkah. So there were no brass, there was no rice, no sustenance, no money being sent with the pilgrims. And my father was studying in Patani. The Japanese took over southern Thailand before they came to Singapore. My father was forced to walk from Patani back to my hometown, Nakhon Si Thammarat. My grandfather was forced to return from Makkah because of the war too. They found each other and became the nucleus of a new Pondok or a new madrasa. 3 years later, I was born.
The story is incredible because first of all, it was your great-grandfather 75 years ago, then your grandfather, then your father, and then it came to you. But before we get to what happened from that point onwards, when you were still quite young, your mother and father went to Saudi to study. And
I was 2 years old.
You were 2 years old.
They left me.
And they left you. Is that how you see it?
Yeah. During that time or now, I think they call it Sabilillah, on the road to God, in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or of God, and the audience here would understand. So they left me with my grandparents, 2 years old, like an orphan, and growing up in the confine of the Pondok, but there was no primary school in the Pondok, except the Quran, except the Fardu Ain. So I had to walk out of the Pondok, 3 kilometers, to a Buddhist temple school. So when I come back, I have to change back into a Malay dress, sarong, kepiah, and baju Melayu. And in the morning, I have to wear a uniform, walk barefoot back to the school in a temple ran by a Buddhist monk. So I began from the beginning to be living in multicultural environment.
You are multicultural yourself because in southern Thailand, of course, you are of Malay descent, your family. But I want to quickly go back because when I was reading about your story and when you spoke to me earlier in the green room, you said that you were left in the care of a grandfather, you were left in the care of a Pondok Guru. But as you retell it now, you use the words like abandoned, left, and almost orphaned in a sense. What kind of emotional imprints do you think that experience left you?
Well, it pained me for being left in the care even of my grandparents, but it motivated me to find out what exactly drove them to leave me. Makkah. Later on, when I was at Harvard, after you'll go back to how I got to Harvard, I study Middle Eastern studies. I study Arabic. I study Islam. I study Islamic philosophy. I got a chance to go to Makkah, to go to Jerusalem, to go to Cairo, just to feel for myself why were these cities so important to them to the point where they decided to leave me.
I mean, this in itself is
an inspiration or, I don't know, emotional need for confirmation or something.
We're jumping in different areas because this conversation is so fascinating. I mean, you were born to teachers of Islam, and yet you chose to step out of that environment to learn about it from the outside, from a very rich establishment American system. Do you think that taught you something different about Islam necessarily?
Well, I was born in an impoverished kampong at the foothill outside of the city, about 10 kilometers. And there was no road. In the rainy season, the road disappeared. In the dusty, hot season, I would be dusted all over. I survived, and something was missing at that point. Why were we so marginalized? Why were we outside of the mainstream? Would there be anybody who would do the bridging, who would do the connectivity? And I thought I would become a district officer, just to be that bridge. And my parents said, no, you stay with us 5 years after they came back, and then we'll send you to Cairo, we'll send you to Makkah, we'll send you to Saudi Arabia, to anywhere you want to, but 5 years with us would be enough. I said, no, I want to be a district officer. I wanted to go to Thammasat University in Bangkok to study law.
Which is, of course, exactly what you did, but you did so many more things on top and around and besides that. You were in the Pondok at that time, you told me there were about 80 students.
Yes.
Today, it's extraordinary. I've seen pictures of it just now. 2,100 students from kindergarten all the way up until graduating for university.
I think our audience are quite familiar with Pondok Bantan, because TV3, many Astro have made documentary about this Pondok in southern Thailand. Yeah.
And when you eventually came time for you to go away, at 18 years old, there was an opportunity to have an exchange at the University of Minnesota. You went from one of the hottest climates in the world to officially one of the coldest. And besides that, there was another challenge. The great educators of your family didn't want you to go. Why was that?
Yes, my grandfather had to call a council of advisors whether to allow this young boy to go to America, because they were not quite sure whether he's going to lose his soul to the Satan of the West. So half of his advisors said we should not allow him to go. For sure, he will be victim to all the temptations of the West.
And were you, by the way?
I don't know. I'm still...
What were you tempted? What were you tempted by?
Well, my grandfather was worried about the state that I was going to, Minnesota. At that time, he heard a lot about miniskirt. He thought the state was full of miniskirts. But, so, the other half of the council said, no, his life is going to be different from ours. We should allow him to go. And then the half that opposed said, how can you be sure that he's not going to be victim of the Satan? And the pro side said, how can you be sure? Everything is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My grandfather came in the middle, I brought him up, let us take the risk, let him go. And everything went wrong since then.
Of course, there was a historical significance, jokes aside, because the Pondok went from great-father to grandfather to father. You were not only the oldest son, but the oldest child of 11. So this was very much the expectation that you would one day take up that mantle. In fact, 2 of your brothers have since. I know your father is no longer here, but for example, your mother, what does she think about this life now that you've lived, coming from the kampung, coming here to KL, but so many other countries leading this region, representing it? What do they say?
She still wants me to come back to the Pondok. She said, come back and spend 2 or 3 more years and you'll be an alim, a guru yourself. But I couldn't feel comfortable. Now my role is to take care of the 2,100 students. Now we change the thatch roof pondoks, like huts, into big dormitories. We got support, we got financial support from friends, from colleagues from Malaysia. So a few of our graduates come to University of Malaya. In fact, the other night when I spoke to the Sultan and the Prime Minister during the gala dinner, the Prime Minister said to the Sultan, Surin has a madrasa at home. And the Sultan said, yes, some of his students are with us at University of Malaya. So it is quite known that I am trying to help these young students to build a better future for themselves. I have been lucky, but I had to fight very, very hard to get out of that environment, to get out of the limitation and the yoke of poverty and lack of opportunity. But I want the younger generation to have better future, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do. My mother still wants me to come back, but after a while, she gave up. She said, okay, I have given you birth. Work for the country, work for the world, work for the ummah. If that's what you want to do, alhamdulillah. So she kind of gave up on it. When she's now 88 years old, still teaching Quran. And when I go back, I would just sit next to her and read my own. And she still correct my Quran, my pronunciation. And we reconcile that you have your work, we have our work, devotional work at home. Because the Pondok in southern Thailand is a halfway house. For parents who realize that education is important for the new world, for the next life and current life, for the next generation, for globalization, but they are not quite confident that the students, their children, their girls should go to government school or to secular school. So the Pondok is a halfway house, somewhere where they feel comfortable, they get both kinds of education.
I think, Dr. Surin, with all due respect, your mother wants you to come home simply because she's your mother. And my mother, who was born in Sumatra, asks me every day to come to go back and live with her. So maybe that's just part of the story as well. The significance is that, of course, that it's so interesting that you have had such a traditional upbringing in family, in education, and then later on you went on to pursue your education through some of America's finest establishments, through the Rockefeller Foundation, through its fellowship program, through Harvard University, for example. Your son is now over at Oxford. Your other son is at Cornell today. There must be some common strands. How does that tie up with the values of the willingness to learn, the ability and the capacity to adapt to changes within your own environment, within your own space, but also with the geopolitics of our times also in mind?
Yeah, I think refusing to accept the confine of the village, of the Pondok, of the community, realizing there is a larger world out there, and if you work hard enough, there will be opportunities. So I got that scholarship for 1 year as an exchange student in Minnesota. I came back, spent 2 years in Bangkok. I got another scholarship to go to Claremont Men's College, liberal arts school. And guess what? my honor thesis was on Islamic political philosophy. Still, that tie, that emotional tie, that hunger for your own roots and trying to understand your own tradition. So I got a group of teachers to become my committee. I had to defend the thesis, and the chairman of the thesis asked me after just a few questions, are you really interested in this subject? Great scholars of the past, Ibn Khaldun, Ibn Al-Farabi, all these great scholars who bridge the Greek political philosophy, Greek philosophy with the European. They pass on the wisdom of the Greek to the Middle Age, to the Dark Age of Europe. I study them. And the chairman asked me, are you really interested in this subject? I said, yes. Why do you ask? He said, well, I have a friend at Harvard who is looking for just a student like you. I almost dropped from the chair. A postdoc student like me going to Harvard? Far away from my imagination and my dream. But 2 or 3 days later, I got a letter in the mailbox at the school saying, we understand you are interested. Here is the application. That's how I got to Harvard.
What did the council
through hard work. Yeah.
And what did the Council of Advisors have to say this time?
They gave up.
They gave up.
I was beyond their reach.
Somewhere along the way, speaking of temptations, you picked up this great love for music and for jazz in particular, just like your king, who was a prolific performer before in his younger period. Where did that come from?
James, in your long journey, a lot of loneliness. You need not only physical sustenance, you need something for your soul, you need something for your spirit. And when I was studying Islamic philosophy, I can't avoid reading about Sufism, about the importance of music in faith, in Islamic faith itself. So I dug further, I read further, and I realized that rhythm, sounds, music, musical instruments are part of the nourishment of the spirit of the soul. So I began to listen, but I could only get to the classics and jazz. I couldn't understand rock.
What do you
It doesn't appeal to me. So on a journey like this, for example, here or in Europe or in Paris, if I have 2 hours before the next trip somewhere else, before taking the message of East Asia, taking the message of ASEAN integration to any other audience, for example, in Europe, I would like to spend a few hours in the museum or an opera house or a concert hall. The last time I was in Paris, before going to Berlin for another meeting, I went to Givigny, the garden of Monet, the Impressionists, in I think west of Paris. It was a fantastic opportunity to really nourish your soul, because the guy really spent time to work on his garden, to work on his residence. So everywhere I go, I would take few hours to take in the play, the music, the concert, the opera, the museums, because human experience is not divided. A total human being must be holistic. And every dimension of the soul, every dimension of the nafs, of the ruh, will have to be nourished. Of course, I pray. Of course, I read Yasin every Friday night. Of course, I do my rituals. But there are other things that would give more refinement to your existence. So I sought those things, and I felt that I could draw inspiration and nourishment and keep me going. Otherwise, you would not go to New York for 24 hours and turn back for a meeting. And you would not go to Tokyo and go on to New York 15 more hours. You couldn't do it unless there is something more than just one speech, something more than just the same message that you keep on delivering. After a while, you feel like this is a broken record. I'm saying the same thing to different audience almost every day. What would keep me going?
Well, we hope.
except some refinement in life that I could find in different forms, but in different manifestations. But it is the beauty, it is the refinement, it is the nourishment, it is the kind of thing that would keep, I think, our soul more comforted.
But we hope that we're asking you different questions today and hearing different answers from you. Your existence, as you put it, survives mainly on the road. And I know that you're recently, as you said, in Paris and Berlin, but also Venice, The Hague, Lebanon, Turkey. You had a brief stopover in Bangkok, then you went to Singapore, now you're here. I know I'll see you in a couple of weeks back in Bangkok as well. That existence, which goes and rolls from one city, one country, one continent to the next, you describe these timeouts that you establish for yourself as giving you also a boost. So not just a change of movement to your rhythm, but it literally gives you energy.
Yeah, I think you need a punctuation in life.
Yeah.
You write a long paragraph, you need that comma, you need that exclamation mark, you need that comma, you need that full stop. I think when you, in your own life, daily life, your prayers, for me, 5 times a day is also that punctuation mark. And when you travel, when you go around the world, 10, 15 hours in the air, when you go down, you finish your work, you need that comma for your life so that you can reflect, so that you can nourish yourself. That's what keeps me going.
That's a beautiful way to describe it as well. When you think of these punctuation marks in your life that are provided by the food that nourishes your soul and feeds your soul, how do you listen to your music when you're in a plane or in a car?
Well, I mean, of course, you have your own gadgets, but every modern plane now would have a classical channel, would have jazz channel.
So you're exploring as well.
Arabic, Malay, all the kinds of entertainment that you want, and all the movies. I just chose music.
I'm listening to you, and I can't help but thinking that even though today you have your own family, so you have 3 adult sons and your wife, and you have and of course you have your mother and a very, very extended family network. Do you still feel, though, that your career has exacerbated or extended that loneliness that you felt as a child, but also going to America when you said that was so desperately lonely for you too?
I think still looking for fulfillment. And having worked in diplomacy all my career, adult life, as Deputy Foreign Minister, and then Secretary General of ASEAN, I think the region needs a new vision. I am afraid what we have worked at Kuala, Tun Abdullah was one of the architects, Tun Musa was certainly pushing this thing. I think the region has come together. This is an important issue that I think I must say, even if it's about my own life. At the end of this month, there will be the ASEAN Summit, which will launch ASEAN community. And then there will be the EAS, which Patla started in 2005. But I think we have grown together, and we have achieved certain level of progress. In ASEAN, there are those who are outside the framework, those who benefit from the framework, those who are marginalized out of the framework. Half of the 600 million people of ASEAN will be Muslims. Over half will be speaking Malay. And I look around, are we prepared to compete, to accommodate, to reconcile with all the challenges coming on to the space of ASEAN, of Southeast Asia? I think that's a big question for all of us. Now, 4 of the ASEAN member states are part of the TPP, including Malaysia. So when we go into the community at the end of this year, it will be half and half. I think we need to think of a new vision, that we need to improve upon the integration. We need to measure up on our rules, our regulations, and our laws and our standards in order to compete better with the rest of the world. Unless and until we have the entire 600 million people on to this job together, joining this journey together, it's going to be very difficult to maintain the growth and the achievement that we have had in the past. So a new vision would be working on something larger than ASEAN even. It's called East Asia Small C Community. Dr. Mahathir started it here. 1997, we went down, all of us went down because of financial crisis, Malaysia included. At the end of that year, there was a summit of ASEAN here. Dr. Mahathir called the 3 other leaders of East Asia, Japan, Korea, and China. And they came. And for the first time, they made the announcement to launch what they call ASEAN Plus 3. We need to work on the larger Asia. We need to work on the United Asia. We need to work on a small C community, Asia. Because I don't want to I want to talk about the big C community. Because the Chinese will say whose blueprint is going to be. The Japanese will say whose structure is going to be, whose idea is going to be. But if it is small C community integrated together, much like Europe after the Second World War, when people like Monet, people like Churchill, people like Konrad Adenauer, people like Schuman worked together, pushed from behind, and it became European Union today. I think that's what ASEAN needs to do, and that's what the rest of the ASEAN population will have to do. I think we need to get on to this journey together. TPP is going to be a threat now, talking about what I'm worried about. And I hope we also can see it as an impetus, as an encouragement, as an opportunity to work hard on our science, our technology, our education, our human resource development, all of us, 600 million of us, not just any half, and work together in order to integrate ourselves with the rest of East Asia so that we could be that locomotive of growth of the global community, which we have been expected to do, which has become that force to pull the global community along. I think we have that responsibility to us. And I think this is important for all of us to think together.
I just wanted, Dr. Surin, push you a little bit on that point. You mentioned the TPP, 4 in, 6 of them are out. Do you think that this transformative process that you think that Asia needs, do you think that ASEAN really holds the key? Do you think that we should build and design an entirely new model?
It's difficult to build a new model without ASEAN being in the core or in the driver's seat, partly because China and Japan will not agree to each other's proposal. Korea will have problems with Japan, China will have problem with Korea, India will have problem with China. ASEAN is the only forum that everybody feels comfortable in. And something is happening last week. The 3 countries in East Asia I mentioned when Dr. Mahathir brought them here at the end of 1997, China, Japan, Korea, had their own summit in Seoul, South Korea. After they have tried this for the last, 8, 9 years, they have broken up, they tried it again. And they promised to work on issues easy and difficult facing them in Northeast Asia so that they can combine the forces, they can join their strengths, they can cover each other's weaknesses so that they can work together. Something is happening in East Asia. ASEAN has given birth to that because they felt comfortable coming to ASEAN. Now that new vision is emerging. And I think for all of us to think larger, bigger, and faster and further into the future, that will be our survival together. If East Asia is going to have the 21st century as our century, as expected, replacing Europe, replacing the US, it will have to begin here, in the Western Pacific, in the western shore of the Pacific, in the Far East, in Southeast Asia. This is the nucleus of the Asia Pacific. Hillary Clinton called us the fulcrum of emerging architecture in the region, here. But we have to think larger than just 10 of us. We have to think further. We have to think more seriously to include the rest on this important project together, much like the Europeans did. I have always said Europe is not our model, but it is our inspiration. And if we can look back and work on them and try to cooperate, try to consult, we will make it in not a too far distant future. But we need someone from Malaysia, someone from Japan, someone from China, someone from Korea, much like the Europeans had someone from Germany, from France, from Italy, from the Benelux country, work together behind the scene, pushing the idea forward. That's the only survival for East Asia. That's the only prosperous future model or path for East Asia. So we need that kind of inspiration.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Europe, and we had people like Adenauer, Churchill, and Schuman, for example. Who could be the Asian equivalents? Who could be the individuals in your mind who could champion this region and who have the capacity and also the political significance to carry that on a global stage?
The problem of ASEAN, another one, is that when we become more democratic, we don't have the visionaries and the towering figures like the Mahadirs, the Lee Kuan Yew, the Suharto. All of us are transient. No more than 5 years, no more than 6 years, no more than 10 years, because of the democratic transition. So we don't have those personalities anymore, and we need to cultivate those leadership. But I think we have. I think Tun Musa can play a role.
Well, we've got Tun Musa in the room, and we also have you, and you've been seen as a great unifier. So we have two people so far. You've mentioned Suharto, Mahathir, Lee Kuan Yew, who are popularly described as strong men.
But they were not democratic.
Right, so you caught me out on this one over here. I will ask you then, is it the transition phase which is posing the challenge, or would you say that you don't need so much democracy, or would you say once we experience the fuller transition and get to the other side, then you will have those personalities back in some form?
I think we are in transition. I think we are all perfecting our own political structure, political landscape. Thailand is going through its own problem. Malaysia has its own challenges. Indonesia has its own problems inside. But all of us are journeying into the direction of more openness. And I hope that at some point we will be able to produce stable, again, and able, efficient, and visionary leaders, who could lead the region to take a leap forward. We need a collection of people who will work on this issue together into the future. Otherwise, the experiment in the past will not get to full fruition.
Well, in response to what you've been saying, do you actually think that democracy doesn't work for this region and for East Asia?
No, I don't say that, but I think we have challenges and we have obstacles and we have problems. In Thailand, if you ask me, what's going on? Well, it's the divide between the periphery and the center. And constitutional monarchy, but monarchy has grown so far and so strong to become a point of reverence. Political, democratic system down here has not matured up. So when there is a problem, a challenge down here, they could not solve it on the political plane. They have to drag down the institution, or they have to get the military to come in. That's the experience of Thailand. Here, I think you are struggling with also how to manage multi-ethnic, multicultural society. It has worked so well so far. Now there's some question, there's some issues that need to be ironed out among the people in Malaysia. Indonesia is facing similar problem. They were so enthusiastic about leaving the establishment and getting somebody new from outside, very much outside, very young, very provincial. But Indonesia is such a big and large and complicated country. Now there is some challenges in governing a country like Indonesia. So democracy is here, but it's not on an even road for every one of us. It's a yo-yo. When one is becoming very democratic, the other one is autocratic. When that autocratic country becomes democratic, the one that used to be very open and democratic became authoritarian. But on the whole, it's moving in the right direction. And I hope we can do economic development, we can do economic integration, we can also work on our political transition, political institutionalization, democratization along the way into the future. I think of all the problems that we probably have less than many other regions of the world.
I want to tie this to your story because that's the premise of this face-to-face session, and to talk about your leadership and the way that you grew up. And you said very early on that you imagined a life way beyond your pondok, way beyond your kampong. And you talk about knowing very early on that you wanted to play the role of connector and to achieve that linkage between peoples. And of course you did that with ASEAN. You've been widely lauded for the flexible policy as foreign minister towards Myanmar, on South China Sea, and so on and so on. Interestingly, stories that in the headlines is very weak globally. But you're also somewhat of an outsider still, even in your own country. As a Muslim, you are a member of 4 million Muslims in Thailand, just 6% of the country in a very largely Buddhist-dominated society. Do you think that being part of the mainstream but not being part of the mainstream has given you early unique insights in how to negotiate the skills that are necessary in bringing people together?
I think so. As I told you, I was growing up in a bicultural environment. So it helped me to negotiate how to live through the day in a Buddhist temple where I went to school and back to the pondok. Life is divided into hours in the temple, where I was pursuing my primary education, and back home where I was brought up truly traditional Muslim. Then I lived through that period. I went to America. I lived with a Christian family. I went to a Sunday school, Lutheran church, and learning about the Bible, learning about the prophets, that the names were also mentioned in the Quran. So I was fascinated that after all, it's the same religion of different ages, different epochs. And what's the message of Isa? What's the message of Musa? What's the message of Ibrahim? They have their own tradition. We have our own tradition. So I came to the conclusion that different interpretations of different communities on the same message may lead to different manifestation, norms and cultures in life. Makes me feel humble that you don't rush to judgment. You allow the space for others. You respect the differences, and you understand the complexity of their own cultures. And that's exactly what I have learned. When I came back to Bangkok, I was teaching for a while, and then they asked me to join the parliament. I did. I carry on that role. The role of mediating, the role of trying to reconcile, the role of trying to somehow bring moderation into the debate of the politics of the time. I brought Thailand into the OIC, Organization of Islamic Conference, with that little minority, certainly Malaysia and Indonesia and Brunei helped. And then I went to see Gaddafi when he was alive, in the tent, in the desert. When I got there, Gaddafi said, Thailand has no problem anymore because the foreign minister is a Muslim. And I understand that that's the ticket that got Thailand into many of the international organizations, because the Islamic countries helped Thailand, because the foreign minister was from Thailand. I think the Thai government or the Thai leadership thought Surin can be helpful. But I told them from the very beginning that don't appoint me as a decorative piece. Don't appoint me because you can tell the world that, you can tell the country that we have a Muslim in the cabinet. Appoint me because you think I can deliver.
And that's what you did when you were Secretary General. So many of your predecessors were officials who are largely seen as symbolic, but many people say that you were the first Secretary General who had any real political significance, probably less secretary and more general on the field. Your grandfather, the council, your parents, they obviously had concerns when you chose to step out of your space. And as you said, they shouldn't have been. You had grown up bicultural. You then went into a truly multicultural world. You lived with a Christian family. You spent time studying what they believe and what they hold up as their own faith. But there are many young people in the audience today, and WIEF has its own Young Leaders program. What would you say to them about how to retain your core, that no matter how you start off, that you achieve knowledge of who you are and you don't stray away from that path?
Well, I think draw the inspiration from your own tradition, from your own culture, and always carries in yourself that you are different. And anything you do, any speech you make, any time you stand up on the floor of the parliament, the message has to be different from others. Because you are delivering a message that has been inspired, and you believe in it, and you grow up in it, and you carry with it in yourself, in your characters, in your personality. Be mindful of the fact that every time you stand up in front of the people, they know who you are, and they expect to hear something different from others. And that's how I carry myself in the Thai parliament, that every speech will have to be different from others, and every action will have to be different from others, and maintain yourself so, and be true to yourself, and then be committed to your own cause, and don't waver, and you will get there. All the scholarships that I got, nobody expect anything back from me. Rockefeller Foundation, Ford Foundation, Harvard, Oxford at the end, nobody wanted anything back from me, because they have enough, because they have more than I. But what they expect from me, from every one of you, is you give back to others who have less than you. And that's what I'm trying to do with the younger generation. Every time a student asks for a recommendation to go to a good school somewhere, I will never be hesitant. And I work hard to take care of the 2,100 students from 6, 7, 8 years old until 2021, in order to help them to also find a better future, more choices in life, and more responsibility, more productive. I think if you commit yourself to that cause, that mission, it'll take you somewhere. Don't waver.
You say that you hold yourself accountable, every time you stand up in your parliament. Sometimes politicians are very good at fooling each other, but your greatest judges, so to speak, are the children whom you visit. I think almost every month you travel the 200 kilometers outside of Bangkok back to your hometown, and you go back to the pondok where you grew up, vastly changed, new dormitories, huge fields, the mosque's still there, and these extraordinary pictures of boys and girls who become young men and young women ready to face the world. What do they ask you, and what do you tell them?
I tell them that be prepared for change. Just like my half of the council who sent me to America said his life is going to be living in a world different from ours. I told him that things are going to change very quick, very fast. If you're not prepared, if you're not educated, if you don't have the skills required to survive, you will be left behind, and nobody to be blamed except yourself. Here is the opportunity. So I talk about change very often. I encourage them to prepare for the future very often. Every time I go there, I will speak in front of the flagpole after they pay respect to the flag and national anthem, Thai national anthem. I would spend 10, 15, 20 minutes talking to them, giving them encouragement and inspiration that their life will be full of challenges. Be prepared for it. Education is the best way to prepare yourself. Without it, you won't be able to survive in a very, very complicated and competitive future. Some of them took the advice. Many of them, about 10 a year, would come to Nilampuri, which is a campus of the University of Malaya in Kelantan. And from there, they would come here to Kuala Lumpur to study every discipline. And many of them would go to the Middle East. A lot of them would go to Thai universities. We are beginning to see the opening of the Ummah in southern Thailand. We are beginning to see the confidence that they have that this world is also very important and belongs to them too, that they have to be prepared before they get to Akhirah. And I always told them, you only have yourself to depend on. You only have yourself to help you, nobody else. I give you the opportunities, I give you the resources, I give you the housing, I give you the scholarship and the opportunities. If you don't take it, you won't make it.
Dr. Surin, I want to finish off today by linking your story to someone sitting in our front row here. Tun Musa Hitam has very graciously hosted us here again, not only for WIEF, but here in his home of Kuala Lumpur. And Tun, when I went onto Instagram last night, I know you're not on there because I searched for you. When I went to Instagram last night, one of the young leaders in your program talked about you, and he said that, quoted you as saying that good leadership gives way to guidance and also leads to empowerment. As you finish off here, not only talking about the optimism of your own story, but your concerns for our own backyard, what's the warning of what bad leadership can produce?
Bad leadership?
Yeah.
Well, bad leadership, I think, begins with that you don't prepare for succession, that you don't have the plan for anybody to take over from you because you are not going to be here forever, because your time is limited, just like any human being. So you need to prepare for that succession. And I think we need to prepare a pool of successors who can really take up the mantle, take up the cause. Bad leadership certainly will provide those people behind you with no direction, with no norms and no values, and no inspiration. You are there mechanically, but you are not there holistically, you are not there spiritually, you are not there emotionally. If you are in an organization committed, passionate, and emotional and inspirational, you don't have even to say it to your people, your followers, that this is the way to go forward. they will absorb, they will learn, they will notice. And I think that's what leadership means. Show the way by action more than just by words. And show the way with your full commitment, with your full emotional commitment, and even spiritual if you want. But you have to have that passion. Do your best, 100% today, full capacity. You will inspire people along the way. That's, I think, what students expect. I'll go back to what Aristotle said about leader. Good leader has to be a good teacher. You are not a good leader if you can't show example, if you can't lead by example, if you can't inspire by your own actions. And that's what I think leadership will have to be. Leadership cannot be devoid from moral and ethical framework. It will have to be contextualized, because that's what reaches down to every soul, the morality, the spirituality, the emotion. Not just materialistic, not just mechanical leadership, not just bureaucratic leadership, but it will have to be charismatic, it will have to be inspirational, it will have to be ethical, it will have to be spiritual, all at the same time. I think the world needs a transformation, and that transformation can only come from that kind of leadership. And it is not one individual that can do this. It will have to be a collective effort. It will have to be a class of leadership. It will have to be a group of leadership all around who can show the light for the rest forward into the future. They are talking about what at the UN? Sustainable development. This world is running out of gas, literally, James. We find out now that everything is limited, everything is finite. Clean air is finite, clean water is finite, minerals down there is finite, living resources in the sea is finite. In 35 years, we will have 2 billion humanity more. Now 7 billion. But Najib talked about that. Now 7 billion. In 35 years, 2050, 2 billion more. 9 billion on this little planet. And we have no other alternative. What the world is talking about is that global consciousness, that global awareness, that sense of belonging to this little planet together. We own it together. With the capacity, with the help, with the guidance, in our tradition, in my culture, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we have to take care of it. And we have to build this sense of one humanity. We have to build this sense of belonging to this place together, the responsibility together to see the future. The agenda of 2030, sustainable development, equity, prosperity, will not be achieved 15 years from now unless all of us develop this sense of common humanity together. And this, according to our tradition, is already there under one creator. And I will end with the wisdom of the pondok, of the madrasa. Before the guru closed the kitab in the evening or any time, and he said, the session is over, the students are on the floor, the last words that the guru would say, Wallahu a'lam. He knows best. What I've been saying is maybe half truth, maybe 75% rubbish, maybe only 25% right. He knows best. But I'm comforted by the fact that I draw inspiration from him. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Well, I was going to add that you may not have eventually have inherited the pondok, but thank you very much for being a wonderful teacher over the last hour. Please join me in thanking Dr. Surin Pitsuwan.